So again, my name's Ivan Ninichuck, and the topic is small business security problems and how we can use Elastic to solve them. So we'll start with the obvious, which is, what is the problem? Well, Richard Baitlick, he wrote a very influential blog and has been promoting this ideal of the security 1%. And versus the security 99%. And what he's getting at is the fact that a lot of the advanced methods of detection, of threat intelligence, threat hunting, and those kind of things are really only available to the top 1% companies, especially here in the United States and, to be honest, around the world. And he considers this an elite status. And he calls on everybody to take action to realize that we need to stop just looking at that 1% of companies, because in fact, our economy is mostly made up of the other 99%. So when I first started in cybersecurity, back in 2018, relatively still new in this field, I went on Upwork as a freelancer. And my work on Upwork has primarily revolved around helping small businesses. I have worked on several projects using the Elastic Stack to help them, reach those levels of security, reach those levels of observability, reach those levels where they are benefiting from things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, where they're benefiting from projects such as Sigma, which give us advanced detection and, the most up-to-date techniques. And I've been able to work with them. I've also been able to try to solve some of the problems of how do we educate them about, the problems that they face with security. And that's primarily been what I've done as a freelancer. I found that they tend to hire freelancers because, quite frankly, it's cheaper than full-time employees. A lot of the companies, as many of you know, they don't have the funding to have a regular security department. And I found a lot of them don't even have a regular IT department. They don't really have anybody designated for IT, let alone security. And so they end up going for a freelancer because, they only have to pay for the services they use. There's no overhead and no taxes, obviously. And so that's been my journey in Upwork. Now, one of the problems I faced, though, while working with small businesses is they tend to have the view that because they're small, they won't be targeted. And so that also limits my ability as a freelancer, I found. Because to a certain extent, maybe an employee of a company would have more sway, although I've heard even at regular big companies, sometimes security has a problem making their point. But it's even harder as a freelancer because you're not always going to be able to continue working there. Even the relationship might just be for a single project. And so that's been problematic for me. I've had cases where a client may ask me to do an incident response, and it turns out that the cell phone that they use for MFA had been breached, weeks ago, and their website mail was breached, and all these different areas. But when I wanted to do the proper job, I was basically told I would either have to work minimum wage per hour, or I would get half the time that you need to really do the job. And unfortunately, I had to decline the job because out of respect for myself and my abilities, and also out of respect for the fact that if I did the job in half the time, they were just going to get hacked in a month. It was just going to be another breach, and it wouldn't get it done. And that's a sad fact that there's that problem. So it's a two-pronged problem practically. You have small businesses without the resources to help themselves from a security perspective. And then you also have the misnomer among small business owners that they don't require security like the big companies do. They don't think that they are at threat. And to be honest, it can be frustrating. I'm a Star Wars fan, and I can really most easily get it across as the Jedi, all the Jedi Masters are sitting in the room with the obvious Sith Lord, Palpatine here, and they're like, don't be silly, there's nothing evil here. And that's literally how I feel sometimes when I'm having these conversations. The Sith Lord is in the room, and you would think Yoda and Mace Windu would know that, but they don't. But the sad fact is, 43% of cyber attacks are actually against small businesses. That's almost half. And what's even worse is that the average cost is almost $200,000, which for a lot of small businesses is enough to throw them out of business. So, it's one of those things. You don't want to feel pushy with your client or seem that you're just trying to sell them on more services. You don't want to be the crooked mechanic trying to fix things that are broken. But what you're really trying to do is protect them. And, it's really difficult from that perspective to try to understand that, to try to go over the numbers. Hey, small businesses are being targeted, especially with COVID going on and everything. They're getting targeted even more. So how do we solve it? Because I didn't come here just to complain about the problem. I didn't come here just to cry wolf. I came here to actually tell you how we as a community, the Elastic community specifically, can solve this problem. And I'm a history major, funny enough. I may work in cybersecurity, but my degree is in history. So I like to look back, and I like to look for solutions that way, because why reinvent wheels? And the lesson that I've learned in history is that when you have a group that is small and unrepresented, the best thing they can do is organize together. And this happened in the United States during the 1870s to 1890s, and something called the Farmers Alliance. Because at that time, the little individual farmer was the small business. They were the ones who weren't being protected. They weren't getting the freight rates on trains and storage that they needed. They weren't getting the loans they needed, and it was hurting them, and they were going out of business. And so what they did was they created the Farmers Alliance, which was a method of pooling their resources, and by working together and by creating special government regulations, special banking arrangements, they were able to strengthen small farmers and succeed. And so the way I got involved in this was a client who thought very similar to me about small businesses came up to me, and they proposed a challenge. And the challenge was, can you create a security platform using mostly open source software that can be provided to small businesses as a service? But the business model also fits the restraints faced by most small businesses. And being the ever clever Elastic guy that I am, I said, sure, I can. So at the time, I created this wonderful presentation that I called Full Spectrum Monitoring. And my ideal was that the 99% was going to get the same protection, the same focus that the 1% get. So I wanted to cover network, I wanted to cover endpoint, I wanted to cover cloud, and I wanted to cover serverless. Now, at the time, this was late 2018, this was before the CM application, this was before Elastic Common Schema, this was before Elastic Agent, this was even before a lot of the Beat modules were put in. So I had fun finding different multiple components of how to pull this off. The base of it all was RockNSM, which is a network forensics collection platform. It primarily uses Zeek and Suricata, but what's nice about it is that it's fully self-deploying. using Ansible and comes on a CentOS binary. So you can just set it up and it deploys everything. It's very modular. So for instance, I didn't use a local stack. I used Elastic Cloud because I wanted to provide this as a service to multiple customers. The other thing I did was at the time, I was studying threat hunting from the work being done by Roberto Rodriguez on the Helk. I've learned a lot from him. He's a great guy. I've met him in person, and I consider myself lucky to have had, live conversation and really get to the heart of what he's taught a lot of people about threat hunting and finding the patterns that an adversary uses. And so what I did was I took the Logstash configurations from the Helk and I fed them into a modified RockNSM. And I was able to combine the two pipelines that way. And then, of course, I had Elastic Beats that were covering cloud and serverless. And then for detection rules, because again, this was before the detection engine, I had Sigma rules. And the project went pretty far, but there were limitations for the project. Mainly, there was a lot of user interfaces that were going to have to be created. And it was a little unwieldy trying to get all these components to all work together. I spent so much time just watching Logstash logs flow across my screen as errors popped up in the pipelines. Then I can literally just type in tail-f, and I don't even have to put less. I can actually just let them all scroll, and I can see what's going on. That's how many times I had to do that. But the good news is that since that project, there have been immense improvements to the Elastic Stack that I feel warrant bringing this ideal back, bringing back the intention of creating a security as a service for small businesses. And the improvements that I'm pointing to, you're all familiar with, or you may not be, but here they are. The Elastic Common Schema, the CM application, the detection engine, event query language, and most specifically, Elastic Agent and Fleet, because that replaced a whole lot of coding I was going to have to do using Ansible to deploy beats and configure things. So for me, Elastic Agent and Fleet really changed the game. Obviously, everything else too, especially the CM application. But I still feel that there's more that needs to be in place to really make it work. And this is the list I came up with for what is still needed. And this is basically my wish list for the Elastic Stack, since I know Elastic is listening. First of all, Fleet needs to be able to deploy in bulk. Right now, we have a really good way of doing one agent at a time. But if we're going to make this efficient, we need to be able to deploy multiple agents, preferably with a single PowerShell script or some other maybe bash script, depending on the platform. We need to be able to do it in bulk. A common problem, too, I've seen multiple times is the difficulty with multi-tenancy. Even though we have Kibana spaces and we have the ability to set users locked out of indices, it's still a hassle to build multi-tenancy into your pipeline. Usually because the tags have to be put manually into the configurations. And so you end up having to have a configuration for every customer you have, which at the time became a headache to manage. So what I propose is that multi-tenancy be built in to the Elastic Agent by having tags at the Kibana level. So when you create an agent, you can put a tag, say customer A, and then you can put another tag for a different agent, say customer B. Then when you create an account on Kibana for somebody, you can you can start locking things down, not on the indices level or the space level necessarily, but also on that tag level. It would make it so that you don't have to have multiple configurations, because otherwise, even with the agent, you would still have to put the tag yourself. But if we could do that on the Kibana level, that would really streamline things. The other thing that's really big on my wish list is system actions such as isolation brought to Elastic Endpoint. Currently, I know that Elastic in-game endpoint, the original platform that in-game had the ability to say isolate a system as an action. Now, I have no idea if we're going to see those features brought down to the tier. You can still get Elastic in-game on the tier of, the highest usage tier, even on Elastic Cloud. But I would love to see at least a basic ability brought down into Elastic Endpoint on that free usage tier. Because I know when I was proposing, even with Sigma rules at the time with Watcher back then, detection engine now, I was always asked, well, we can get a message, but can it do anything? So I think to be competitive and to really get bang for your buck, I would really like to see those, at least an isolation ability, added to Elastic Endpoint. And then finally, there was a fantastic web application called Which Fish that just came out, and it was entirely made using Canvas. This was James, of course. This was done by James Spiteri, who works for Elastic. I call him my Elastic sensei, because literally since I became a community user, he's helped me along the way. And he created this Which Fish. And it's interesting because the domain is hosted on its own domain, but it's all Canvas. He managed to put Canvas on this domain, completely lock it down. But it looks so sleek. It looks so seamless when you're using it. Very impressed. And I think it would replace a lot of the user interfaces that we were going to have to create for the customers. Because sometimes, a customer can get intimidated by a platform like, Kibana, when they have to navigate a lot of more complicated buttons and such, even though it's relatively more simple now that, you have everything divided instead of just all on, a single bar. But still, you want to have a simple, pop up and, look at the pretty graphics interface, which is exactly what Canvas is good at. So I'm really looking forward to the blog that James is going to write, and really looking forward to seeing how this was implemented. So Rebecca Bass was a pioneer in cybersecurity. She started very early on in the government work. She worked in private industry. She was actually known as the den mother of cybersecurity. And she made a really good point about how to look at the relationship of where we are with cybersecurity, and how does that apply to past industries that have faced similar problems. And she brought up the automobile industry. And her quote goes, "It took 100 years for automobile safety to become a dominant force in the auto industry. The same can be said for security in IT. We need a Ralph Nader moment." Now, for those of you who may not know what she meant by that, Ralph Nader at the time wrote a book which was called Unsafe at Any Speed. And what it was doing was calling for seatbelts, later airbags, to be put in automobiles by law. Because at that time, when it came out, it wasn't there. Rebecca Bass actually pointed out a very interesting fact, which was the first patent for a seatbelt was in the 1860s. But it wasn't until the 1960s that the conversation even came up and eventually became law. So literally it took 100 years. Now, hopefully, we might be able to get there before 100 years. Computers, roughly with the ENIAC, in the 1940s, 2040. So, we got about 15 years before we reached the 100-year mark. But we won't be able to do that if we only focus on the 1%. We have to make that commitment. We have to make the Ralph Nader moment now. And that's what I plan on doing. I plan on continuing the work to create not only the Elastic platform that will be the most affordable and efficient for small businesses, but also create a business model where they will be able to pull resources, get help from fantastic organizations like the Small Business Authority and such that's been working on creating frameworks to help small businesses implement better security. And also, more than anything, help train others who want to work in cybersecurity, who want to get those skills that the 1% have, but give it to the 99%. And I have a lot of plans. I already have a small team to do it with. But what I need are more dedicated individuals. Because as a community, we are one node in a community cluster. Thank you.
Great talk, Ivan. I don't see any questions in the chat just yet, so I want to take a second and ask a question about something that you said at the very beginning.
Okay.
You said, out of respect for myself and my abilities, you chose to kind of take a different route in terms of, I guess, going for the lower hanging fruit and often picking off, I guess a little more than would be required in that amount of time that you were being given. Do you feel like this call to action here is taking on more? Do you feel like you have enough time to implement that?
Yeah, in that particular case, I was referring to whether I would take the job without the time, and with the fact that it was going to basically leave them in a situation where they were going to be breached again. This is actually my primary employment currently. So I don't have I don't have a day job that takes my time. I'm a full-time freelancer. And then the rest of my time, I train other individuals, cybersecurity people who are in IT and they want to transfer their skills over.
How has it been working with folks that are not, as you mentioned, you said like the 1% of knowledge and giving it to the 99%. How has it been working with that 99% and training them to get them into that category of the 1%?
That's fun, actually. I really enjoy it. Before I went into cybersecurity, I was actually a professional tutor for several years. So I have an education background. Like I said, I was actually a history major and such. And I really enjoy it because one thing I've learned is that if somebody has the passion, it's about their confidence level. I've learned that teaching people is always 25% the content, 75% confidence. So if they have the confidence that they can do it, that it's what they want to do, then I've seen people master topics that just fly through. And I've always done my best. Again, I actually just worked on a whole new series that I'm calling the Foundation series. And I'm going to be launching a YouTube channel with it very soon, hopefully in the next month or so. So I'm very excited. It's something I really like to do. I also grew up in what you might call a disadvantaged neighborhood, Santa Ana, California. And so it's something that I became very passionate about, working with those who our education system kind of left behind almost. So it's something I've just grown up with. I've always wanted to help people beyond just cybersecurity, but lift themselves up.
One of the things that has happened recently in the tech space is more of a, I guess a liberation of the professional, giving more and more tools to the person that just wants to plug a bunch of buttons in and all of a sudden have a working site. Do you think that security and small business security in terms of this type of infrastructure that we're building, do you think it'll ever get to that point to where there won't be necessarily a need for this type of training that, eventually just small business owners will be able to do this on their own?
Unfortunately, I don't believe so. Because, see, security, this is one thing I've only really learned in the last 6 months. Security is always two things. You have to secure an environment, then you have to defend the environment. You can give them templates. I know like Microsoft Azure has some great starting policies and templates that help you secure the environment, but nothing's ever going to make up for defending the environment. And nothing's ever going to make up for the human element of defending the environment.
Really quick, you showed a nice image of all of the Jedi sitting there in the room with Emperor Palpatine, and you already knew it was coming. Yeah, I'll see if we'll pull that up on the screen.
Yeah.
It was at this moment where, in my mind, I was like, why don't they just jump him?
Yeah, why don't they just do it? It's obvious.
Is there a mob
click
mentality that we can approach to some of these problems, kind of similar to this room, where you have a bunch of professionals that have the ability, they think, to just kind of go and tackle some of these problems head on?
I think so. I definitely think that we really do have to. I mean, we almost do it ourselves, where we think, oh, we can't take this on. Or, like the Jedi, they were like, oh, the Sith won't return. We would know if they returned. and so it's kind of like that with small business security. It's like, oh, they're not attacking small businesses. And then you look at the numbers and you're like, wait a minute, they are. And then you're like, well, small businesses aren't a big part of our economy. It's like, wait a minute, they are. So we really do got to get to that point where it's like, come on, guys, we just need to bust out our lightsabers here. I don't know how to say it any other way.
I agree. I think that's one of the things that we hope to do. And like you said, it's all about education. It's all about, trying to be as proactive as possible and get more people looking at the same problems. The more diverse of a group that we can have looking at some of these issues, the closer we can get to a solution. One more question that I have for you. You gave us a list of some things that you would like to see. Now, yes. I took a peek at our latest release, 7.11. Unfortunately, I don't think we hit some of the things on your list yet, but still working on it. I'll call some people. We'll see what we can do. But with some of the things like searchable snapshots, with the alerting, functionality in place that we put in, do you feel like we're on the right track?
Yes, I definitely feel that that's one of the reasons I went ahead and put in for this talk. Because I really want to promote the fact that Elastic is where it needs to be now. I showed the previous project that was done 2 years ago as a sign that this is what we need. As far as I'm concerned, once Elastic Agent and Fleet are general availability, it's perfectly possible. You can go. The other things are like, my wish list. And I always put that out there. I always try to talk, I'm always on the community Slack kind of being like, hey, this would be great. But
well, I will definitely say the fact that, you're one of our top contributors, year in, year out, you do a lot for the community as a whole. Are there ways that you think that the community could grow to support what you're hoping that we accomplish?
I think we're doing really well, actually. The fact that we have the community Slack now, by the way, anybody who's not on the community Slack, definitely come on. Talk about your ideals. I know just the other day I learned about a whole plugin that somebody did for grabbing CTI that I was always interested in. And I'm like, wait a minute, someone's doing it, And so I really feel that I was actually asked a really interesting question at the last meetup that I went to for LA, and they asked me what was my favorite part of the stack. And I said, it's how excited it makes people. And that's what we need. We need to see the excitement. We need to hear what you're excited about so that we can start working together on this.
Very cool. Well, I think that's going to be enough time for this, but thank you so much, Ivan, for your talk and the great conversation afterwards.
All right. Thank you for having me.